Are you pregnant and thinking about breastfeeding, or maybe in the middle of your breastfeeding journey and really struggling? Then this video is for you. Hi, I'm Alicia Weber. I'm a therapist and coach, helping women from trying to conceive all the way through that postpartum phase. This is a testimony from a client I worked with, Emma, and her story of navigating through breastfeeding, the ups and the downs and the turmoil she went through, and how she got on the other side of it. We're both hoping that her sharing her story today with you will help you with your own journey. Take a listen. So, you walked through just an incredible journey, Emma, and it was such a process, and I'm so honored to be able to be by your side through
Yeah.
that. And it's bumpy, and a lot of times the deep internal work is bumpy, especially during postpartum.
Yeah.
And we can understand something philosophically and land in one place beforehand, but then when we're actually going through it, we can shift in such huge ways
Yeah.
that are so emotionally deep and difficult and sometimes unpredictable. And I just
Yeah.
really appreciate your willingness to share this story with others in hopes that it might be able to help other moms. So thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah. Of course.
So let's start out with kind of our work together. We started working together when you were trying to conceive and
Yes.
we're going through fertility treatment and all of those
Hmm.
components of it. Thankfully, had the miracle blessing of getting
Yes.
pregnant and that pregnancy following through
Yes.
to the birth of your sweet little girl.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit, or tell others a little bit about our discussion around breastfeeding, kind of where you were landing philosophically around that, knowing that sometimes it's a struggle for moms to do breastfeeding while you were pregnant before you gave birth.
Yeah. I, because I went through fertility treatment and I had spent over a year trying to get pregnant, I kind of had accepted through our work that things don't always go to plan. I wanted to get pregnant without treatment. I wanted to get pregnant within the first 3 months of trying, or whatever that story was that I had. I wanted all those things, and that didn't happen. So I'd been spending a ton of time with you and outside of our sessions working through kind of accepting what is, and just knowing that what I want, what I plan is not always what ends up panning out. So I very much had the belief like I would love to breastfeed. And if I'm not able to, that's okay. I had some things in mind that might make it challenging for breastfeeding. So I had lots of nipple sensitivity before pregnancy and during pregnancy. I have shallower nipples, they're a bit more flat. So in my understanding of breastfeeding, that those two things can make for complications. So I kind of went in thinking, during my pregnancy, I would love to breastfeed. I really want to make that work. I would love to feed my baby my milk. I really believe in breastfeeding. And if for some reason I can't,
Mhm.
she can be fed formula. I was a full formula baby. I never had one drop of breast milk, and I'm perfectly fine. And I know logically, rationally, all of those things, my baby will be just fine too. Formula is great. And if I got it 30 something years ago, it is way improved. So it's going to be even better now. She
Yeah.
can take a bottle. We'll call it good.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Those were good conversations, and I was grateful to hear kind of you were starting from that place of
Yeah.
understanding, yes, fed is best. I'm gonna try to breastfeed, and that was great. To be able to start from that place for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then,
And then I had my beautiful baby girl, and I immediately felt this connection. I mean, it'll make me cry. This connection and love with my child that I never knew was possible. And all I wanted was to do the best possible thing for her. And I had a really long, hard labor. And so I started off really exhausted. I pushed for 4 hours. I had a manual placenta removal. I was induced, which was not planned. And so I started off pretty spent. My first day with my child, I was just kind of beside myself from kind of the trauma of birth. And yes, everything turned out great. I'm healthy, baby's healthy, but it was really rough. And in the hospital, my baby did not latch. She, I don't really remember this. We had a conversation and you asked me, and I was like, I don't know. I couldn't remember because some of it was just so traumatic.
Yeah.
And we we immediately started using nipple shields because my nipples were not protruding very much and she had a difficult time latching at all. She really could not latch without a nipple shield. And so we were like, okay, we're going to do the nipple shield. If she can latch on a nipple shield, that's great. Let's do it. And we exclusively breastfed for about 8 weeks. And gosh, where do I even start with that? It was, yeah, go
With
ahead.
the attachment piece, how
Yeah,
did what do you feel like shifted in you from the original kind of philosophical
yeah,
standpoint of like, we're gonna give it a go. If it doesn't work, cool, cool.
yeah,
When did it shift to like, I need to be able to breastfeed my baby? Like that
yeah.
attachment to the idea.
I think, I mean, hormones do wild things to our brains.
So do.
And I can't overemphasize enough that, like, my brain no longer felt like my brain. And part of that is the wild hormonal shift. And the other part is lack of sleep. I
Yeah.
mean, we're sleeping in 2 hour shifts with the newborn and waking up, and then you're nursing, right? And I think delivering my baby, there is so much conversation around breastfeeding. And there's such an emphasis on breastfeeding that it didn't even occur to me in those moments postpartum that I could do something else. It did not even cross my mind. And I think the attachment to it was partly this piece of, you are expected to breastfeed. There's
Mm,
conversation around breastfeeding. Everything that is asked of you postpartum is, how is nursing going? How is feeding going? And so you're like, oh right, I nurse. And I think there was this emotional piece of, I've carried this child with my body for 9 months. I have sustained her fully.
yeah.
My body is producing milk now. I am supposed to feed her with my body. That is the right thing to do. This is the natural thing to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. And my baby will be best if I feed her from my milk. That there was this idea that came into my mind that she needs this to be okay. She
Yeah.
is so, I mean, it's your baby is so fragile when they come out. They are so new. They are so deeply needing you as a parent, and especially their mothers. And it became this deep attachment to providing her everything with my body. And that I was responsible for that. And I needed to do that for her. And that if I made a different decision, it was somehow wrong or it wasn't best for her. And quite honestly, it didn't even cross my mind to not breastfeed. And we struggled, I mean, like I said, from the first moment when she came out. And we've now, over those 8 weeks, and we can kind of get into like where this shifted. But my daughter has particular challenges with breastfeeding. She has some structural things going on that just make it difficult. And despite that, it still to me was really embedded that, like, I need to breastfeed her. I
Mhm.
need to nourish her from my milk. I I am responsible. I have to do this. It wasn't even I should or I can't, I have to.
Yeah.
And that made it really hard for me to let go. And I had this deep desire. I mean, it is connecting. It's a beautiful piece to hold your child against your skin and to watch them coo while you feed them, to stroke their skin, to stroke their heads. I mean, it's like, it's chemically, it is unlike anything you've ever experienced. And to hold your child to your skin and be able to nourish them is one of the most beautiful things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it just chemically does something to your brain as a newly postpartum mom who's going through major hormonal changes. And the thought of taking that from her or from me felt unbearable. It felt like I could not sever that piece. And I couldn't even think of a different way to get that without it being breastfeeding.
It's so interesting because, when we look at these issues
Yeah.
from a more removed standpoint, We can kind of make our own decisions based on our beliefs and values and information that we have and all of those pieces. When we're in the middle of it and we're flooded with what you were identifying, those attachment hormones,
Yeah.
they are so strong. And we're told so little about that postpartum period and how dramatic shifts are happening in our
Yeah.
brain. It's actually changing our gray matter. It's
Yes.
not just hormones, like the
No.
actual composition of our brains look different now during postpartum. We now know more of that, but we feel so differently and kind of process and look at those things so differently. And it makes sense. I mean, biologically, we're
Yeah.
designed to take care of these very vulnerable beings that really, without us, wouldn't be surviving outside the womb.
Yes.
Makes sense where it comes from. But in an age like you talked about, where we have the ability to feed the baby without our bodies or their bodies performing in such a way that it works out, um, we want to be able to use those resources and rely on those resources to make sure that our babies are okay. And way in the past, we talked about this as well, you know, it's not just formula. There used to be wet nurses.
Yeah.
Our bodies and the baby's bodies were not always going to work to make breastfeeding happen and successful at the beginning. And, things like having that tongue tie clipped
Yeah.
were a normal thing way, way back in the day, like prior to the development of formula. Like it was understood that there are difficulties. But I think the response back then of providers, of our families, of community around those challenges seemed like they were different. It was more
Yeah.
normalized. And now it's not as much. And we are getting messages sometimes, unfortunately, from providers that add levels of pressure and anxiety
Yes.
to our experience that just compound that biological response of I need to be able to feed my baby with my body. I have to make this work or I'm failing my baby and my baby's not going to be okay. Um,
Yes.
so, your experience there is just so incredibly common that
Yeah.
we go from this philosophical place of like, we're good either way. The baby's going
Yeah.
to be fine. Of course, the baby's going to be fine too. If I don't do this, I'm
Yeah.
stealing something from my baby. I'm experiencing this loss myself of this attachment. And like, I need to do this. I've got to make this work no matter how much pain I'm in,
Yeah.
no matter how sleep deprived I am, no matter the cost.
Yeah.
I need to make this happen. And I watch so many women like you
Yeah.
do the things, now I'm getting emotional, do the things that it takes despite the impact that it has on them. Because, I had that experience as well.
Yeah.
Despite what it costs to you, no matter what it takes, you're willing to just endure
Yeah.
so much in order to be able to feed your baby and at such a high cost mentally and emotionally, and sometimes at a cost in terms of attachment to your baby.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit of the cost for
Yeah.
you, how difficult it was to navigate some of the challenges and to get to a place where you had adequate diagnoses and
Yeah.
treatment for what was actually taking place?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really hard 8 weeks to get to an understanding of why this is so difficult. And I think there's so much rhetoric around, well, it's really hard at first, but if you keep pushing through, it gets better. And so I had that mantra like, well, I don't want to give up or quit because it's supposed to get better. Your nipples are supposed to be cracked and chafed and bleeding, and you're supposed to hate it. And it's supposed to be really painful, but it gets better. And so a week went by, really painful, even with a nipple shield. 2 weeks went by, really painful, even with a nipple shield. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, on and on. And I started feeling like this can't be normal. My baby had what we ended up finding out, and I'll kind of share how we got there. My baby has congenital torticollis, which is essentially she developed with a short neck muscle and a long neck muscle. And part of that is just the way that my body, housed my baby, if you will. I have a small torso. I don't have a lot of room. She was heads down from 20 weeks on. And you think about being in this position for 20 plus weeks, this doesn't lengthen. These muscles connect to your tongue. My baby had a tongue tie, which also is, my husband had a tongue tie. They never knew it's still there. He learned how to cope without it, but these muscles in your tongue connect together. So she had some real challenges that make it so that they can't stay attached to a nipple easily. She can't feed on one side as well because she's got a short muscle in her neck. Her tongue doesn't grip, it doesn't connect. So I started kind of just noticing, and this is through my own research, like Googling, my baby pops on and off the nipple the whole time. Is that normal? Like, is she just supposed to outgrow that? We're feeding for 45 minutes every feed. Is that normal? Like, how long do you breastfeed a baby for? Do you do both breasts? Like, I didn't know these things. So I started just Googling, which Googling is a terrible place to go. But I was desperate for answers because it
Yeah.
didn't feel normal. So
Yeah.
then we got in and I reached out and found lactation consultants to go see. And each time, I think I went 4 or 5, 6 times, we would do weighted feeds. And yes, thankfully she was transferring enough milk, but it was 35, 45 minutes. And that never changed. It never got better. As newborns, that can happen, but it gets better. They start, improving. She
Yeah.
wasn't improving. And then finally someone said, oh, well, she might have tongue tie. So we got that evaluated. She has a tongue tie. Oh, the tongue tie gal said she has a head tilt. She might have torticollis. Let me refer you to an occupational therapist. And through all this, we're still nursing. We're still exclusively breastfeeding. And she was feeding every 2 hours from the start of a feed. So it would be 45 minutes of nursing, burp, change, it's been an hour. In 1 hour, I have to start again. And so I just started mental health wise tanking. I just started really feeling dread every time I heard her start fussing to feed. The clock would go and it would be about an hour and a half. And I would start getting very anxious about, like, I'm going to have to start feeding her. Is she going to get a full feed from me because it's taking so long? She's falling asleep at the breast constantly. I had to have a fan on 24/7 to feed her. I have to tickle her, wake her, rouse her. And it still never felt like she was fully satisfied. And so I would just start feeling extreme anxiety.
Yeah.
And then it would start being complete dread of, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to feed her. I don't want her to have to need me. And I started feeling really resistant to being there for her. I started having the internal thought of, I don't want to pick her up. I don't want to have her on me because I'm going to be stuck here. It's not going to be enough. My body can't do this. I'm failing her by not being able to feed her properly. And the hardest part is through all of this, even while I was trying to find why this was not working, I never even considered that maybe this was an issue on her side. Maybe this was a problem that she was having. It was all, something is wrong with me. My nipples aren't good enough. I'm not latching her properly. I don't have the right technique. I don't have enough milk. I don't blank, blank, blank. And it made it very hard to see clearly that this wasn't a failure on my part. This was a biological structural issue that my
Yeah.
child was experiencing that she needed help with.
Yeah.
And I feel like until I was able to really separate that this wasn't a reflection of me as a mom, this wasn't a me problem, this was actually just a misalignment in, like, my child's feeding abilities and my, like, her her being able to latch and breastfeed wasn't working for her. It really had nothing to do with me. And I
Yeah.
I couldn't see that. And then when I finally got the diagnosis of she has torticollis and she has a tongue tie, those two pieces from a medical professional, finally our occupational therapist saying, and you're still breastfeeding? And I looked at her and I said, yeah, of course, right? Like, of course.
Yeah.
And she kind of looked at me and said, Emma, you do know that these two things together make for extremely difficult breastfeeding success, extremely difficult. And most of the time, babies who have these issues can't even get enough milk from breastfeeding because they can't properly transfer milk. And she looked at me and kind of said, like, Why? You know, she quite honestly asked me, "Are you attached to breastfeeding, even if it's not best for Sylvie?" And I looked at her and I said, I started crying and I said to her, "I didn't know that it wasn't best for Sylvie.
Yeah.
Of course, I will do whatever is best for her. And if a bottle is best for my child, of course, I will do what is best for her." And it was this switch where I really was able to see clearly for the first time logically, which my previous, pregnancy brain would have been able to see, but postpartum, that attachment, I wasn't even able to clearly define like what is best for my child. She needs to
Mhm.
be fed. She needs to not have to expend so many calories to eat, right? Like her working so hard and being on the breast for so long expended calories for her.
Yeah.
And she needs to not struggle, right?
Yeah.
Like those three things. The breast is not the way to do that. She is having a really hard time at the breast.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Well,
clear.
and in addition to that, we
I
talked
was suffering.
emotions. You were suffering so significantly, and you
Yeah,
had wanted this pregnancy, you'd wanted this
yeah,
baby more than anything in the world, and it was taking away
yeah,
so much from your experience of becoming a new mom and being able to enjoy aspects of,
yeah,
that time, that fleeting time with your newborn. And
yeah,
for her, it was affecting your attachment with her, and the attachment needs of your baby
yeah,
are so much more significant than their need to have breast milk versus formula. And we
yeah,
talked a lot about your
yeah,
fears and grief around the idea that there wouldn't be attachment between the two of you anymore if you stopped breastfeeding, because breastfeeding created some attachment opportunities. And so it
yeah,
took a while to kind of get through some of that into a place where you're like, okay, like I can still be attached and actually might have a better
yeah,
opportunity to be attached to my child when I'm not having to dread each moment of
yeah,
holding her and
yeah,
feeding her, when I can maybe be able to enjoy holding
yeah,
her and feeding her again. And that doesn't mean we have to necessarily stop breastfeeding,
yeah,
that we stop enough to
yes,
address the emotional and mental impact it was having on you, and
yeah,
to be able to address the treatment needs of your baby,
yeah,
and being able to find peace with the fact that this could be the end of the breastfeeding journey, but it doesn't necessarily have to.
yeah,
Like, might get to a place where we want to continue it and it can, and it's not as harmful to you or to
yeah,
baby. I think it's important for people to know that just because you stop or pause doesn't mean you can't restart again. So it's not an all or nothing decision,
yeah,
whether it's early on or, further into your breastfeeding journey, that there are ways to restart. It's not always easy, but
yeah.
there are ways to restart or pump in the meantime or things like that, to be able to continue it.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and we talked a lot about that. And I would just say, like the piece on my attachment with her that was also my turning point was there was an evening where I had been feeding her. It was like 8 o'clock. I had been feeding her for it had been like 55 minutes, and she was still like I would take her off, where she would unlatch and then she would just scream. And she was hungry. She was still hungry, and she just was couldn't transfer enough milk. I had been feeding her, and I fed her at 6, I fed her at 7, I fed her at 8, and it just was not working. And it had been a whole day of that, right? And we were at just about 8 weeks at that point. And my I said to my husband, like, I'm done. I am done. I said, give her a fucking bottle. Like, I'm done with this. I cannot tolerate it anymore. And he gave her a bottle. And what the most horrible part of it was, where I knew like this is not okay for me, is he's like, well, how much should she, how much do you want me to give her? Because he was kind of relying on me for the feeding, because that's what I've been doing. And I said, I don't care. I don't even care. Doesn't matter to me. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm done. And I was meaning, I'm done with her. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of this. I
Yeah.
don't want to look at her. I don't want to hold her. I don't want to even care for her needs. And it broke my heart, because this perfect little baby who was struggling, I I was so beyond my limit. mentally
Yeah.
that I didn't even care that her needs were met or not.
Yeah.
And that was not okay for me, right?
Yeah.
Like that is not okay. And we had talked, I wanted to hold my baby, love my baby, kiss my baby, snuggle my baby. And I was dreading every moment of that with her. And that was also the turning point, emotionally, where it was like, this isn't okay for me to be like this. And it's
Right.
not okay for my child to not have a mom who wants to do that.
Yeah.
And so, we had so many conversations. And as somebody who tends to have very black and white thinking, my brain and part of the resistance was, I'm not ready to let go of all of this, but I also can't continue this way. But there's only two options here. You either nurse and you're nursing and that's what you do, or give express breast milk, or you formula feed and that's it. There's no in between. And we had lots of conversations of like, all of this is in the gray zone. And it
Yeah.
took me a couple weeks to figure out and think through, like, what does the gray look like? How is that even possible? Right? My brain does not think that that's even an option. And
Yeah.
so we transitioned slowly into, one less nursing session a day. She got a bottle. Two less nursing sessions a day. She got a bottle. And I would pump. Well, I ended up learning I do not like pumping. That does not work for me. It made me feel depressed. It made me feel overwhelmed. It made me feel unconnected from my child, because instead of those sessions where I could feed her, I then was attached to my pump, and that didn't work for me. So I kind of started accepting that, what, if I'm not going to pump during these sessions, my milk is going to reduce. And I'm okay with that. But that took, a week and a half to be okay with that. I was pumping every 2 to 3 hours,
Yeah.
and learned through that, another pivot here. That doesn't work for me. That's making me unhappy. And my happiness is really important, not just for me, but for my daughter. And
Yeah.
the more I was able to see the situation for the reality it was, not take it as a reflection of me as a mother, really look at my daughter and see what is best for her, like those three together, I was able to let go of this, like, we're going to be an exclusively breastfed baby,
Yeah.
to like, well, maybe we're going to be a combo fed baby.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm learning I don't like pumping. So maybe we're going to breastfeed and then give formula for a little while. Maybe my supply is going to go down. And the more I stopped nursing and wasn't pumping, I found I had so much more joy with my child.
Mhm.
And I was able to laugh with her. I wasn't testy with my husband as much and just pissed off all the time. I didn't want to put her down, right? My husband would say, like, can I take her? Whatever. And I would start saying, like, no, I want her. And he was like, are you sure? Like, I can take her. I'm like, no, I want her. And we got to the place where I reduced so many sessions that it was down to just our morning nursing session. And I had realized in that it took about a month to kind of reduce my milk supply, which is very painful and not fun to do. But I continued because I started seeing, like, I have so much more availability for her. I have so much more joy. I have so much more connection. My
Oh,
husband has to peel her from my arms. He has to like say, okay, I need time with her. And I kind of just was able to see, like, wow, I'm thriving as a mom like this. She
yeah.
takes a bottle in 10 to 15 minutes and she's fed, burps. I hold her and we move on with our life. She's
Yeah.
not struggling. I'm not in continual pain. I'm not dreading a feed. She cries because she needs to be fed. And I'm like, oh, you need a bottle? Come on, let's get you fed, baby. And it just changed. And now we're not nursing at all. I'm not pumping at all. She's exclusively formula fed, other than when I give her some of my frozen breast milk that had previously been stored. And in fact, we're both so much better. It
Yeah.
is like a new world opened up for us. And there are moments that I'm still really sad, really, really sad about how our journey went. I would have loved to breastfeed exclusively nursed. I would have loved that. And I'm sad that that's not how things went. It didn't go as I expected. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And I'm also very, very able to see that this is best for both my daughter and me. And it has to work for both. And I'm grateful for what I learned through this process to be able to let go. And I'm also sad that it did rob me of quite a few weeks of joy with my newborn. It really did. It took away a lot of the moments that could have been different. And I'm
Mm.
accepting that that's just how this went for us. And we're still very connected, but it was traumatic. And I wish that I had, I don't wish anything different. That's not true. I'm more just, it would have been great to have less emotional turmoil for this experience. I
Yeah.
didn't need to go through all of that emotionally and be in such despair and so hopeless for something that had a very, very simple solution. It's
Yeah.
not simple emotionally, but logically it is. My child just needs to be fed. And it had nothing to do with my ability to be a mother, my success as a mother. And my brain really convinced me it did. And that was the hard part.
Yeah. 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 Um, it was hard, I think, on my end to kind of obviously we're trained in doing this and I've gotten better at doing this over the, couple decades of being a counselor, of kind of seeing what I'm like, oh my gosh, I really hope that she, goes a pathway that I think is going to result in her
Yeah.
feeling a lot better,
Yeah.
back to herself again. And you had to go through your own journey,
Yeah.
and so to be able to walk you through that journey and see how hard you worked at getting to where you felt like you needed to be,
Yeah.
regardless of the outcome of the breastfeeding, but just knowing, when you deserve support through this. Because there was a
Yeah.
period of time where you didn't reach out, and I was like, ah, and I saw you again, and you're like, yeah. I know I have to make a change and I don't want to, so I didn't want to talk to you about it, which I mean, this happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
I've done it myself of like avoiding sessions because I don't want to have to face the thing that
I
I,
don't want to confront it because I know as soon as
yes,
I'm going to talk about it out loud, I
yep,
know the answer. I
yep,
know what I need to do,
yeah,
but I do not want to do it. So I'm just going to avoid the conversation.
yeah, yeah. But you work so hard in therapy.
Yeah.
You know where you want to go and you're clear that you deserve to get there.
Yeah.
And you do the work outside of session, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it was an honor to witness just how much you love your baby and how much you really
Yeah.
came into that role as a mother with such um, dedication, you
Yeah.
know, to her and to yourself of the journey you wanted, of the experience you wanted of motherhood, and how you
Yeah.
were able to move to some more flexible thinking and be able to navigate through the grief and
Yeah.
loss associated with the attachment you did gain around needing to breastfeed like so
Yeah.
many women do. So, yeah, but I experienced a lot of relief myself at watching you come out the other side and
Yeah.
be able to find yourself again and to repair that attachment with your baby and be
Yeah.
able to see the joy that you have with your baby, even in session. I'm just like, oh, I love
Yeah.
it so much. What might be something like what would be the takeaway
Yeah.
that you feel like might be helpful to other women that maybe haven't even given birth
Yeah.
yet, or that others that are like right in the depths of where
Yeah.
you were, that are just kind of stuck in
Yeah.
that place of decision making around how to proceed with their breastfeeding journey. What do
Yeah.
you want them to hear, that you think might be the most helpful to them?
Oh man. So many things. I think I would just start with like, you are not a failure if you are struggling. If this is hard and it is not working in the way you expected, there is nothing wrong with you.
Ah,
You are
goosebumps.
not a failure.
So
Like
true.
deeply, you are not. And there is another way. whatever that way looks like, I can't even, everybody's way is different. There
Mm.
is another way than what's currently happening if it's not working for you.
Yeah.
And you will find that. You and your baby together will find what is right. And there is so much joy on the other side of whatever that other looks like. And it's okay to let go. It is okay to make a different choice. You and your baby are going to be okay. And I didn't believe that. And
Right.
I'm like here to say, you and your baby are going to be okay. And my hope for other moms and myself, if I do this again, is to really believe deep down that however the feeding journey goes, you and your baby are going to be okay. And it is okay to not breastfeed. It is okay to formula feed. It is okay to pump. It is okay to do any of the options as long as you and your baby are both thriving,
Mhm.
joyful, and
Mm.
connecting.
Yeah.
That is the only thing that matters.
Yeah. Uh, I hope this this gets through to some people that are in a place
Yeah.
of struggle and potentially prevents, some of the struggle from getting
Yeah.
as intense. I think we can
Yeah.
only prevent it to a certain extent for the same reason that we talked about earlier with kind of the biological attachment
Yeah.
to feeding as we start that journey. But thank you again for sharing this with
Yeah.
others, with other mamas to be. Um, and
Yeah.
and just thank you again for the honor of being able to be by your side through this journey. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you're where you're at with it now.
Me too. And thank you for all of your support. Again, if anybody needs a testament to like, please go to therapy when you're postpartum, please go to therapy when you're in postpartum. Uh, you have helped me navigate so many aspects that I didn't have a way through. I did not know how to move through them. And feeling very stuck is really challenging. And you've allowed me the space to really be able to work through the stuck places, to to find what's true and best for me so that I can show up in the way I want to. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much, Emma. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I'll see you in your next session.
I'll see you then.
Okay. Bye bye.